Hello everyone, good evening and thank you for joining us. As always, markets have taken all of us by surprise, and budget came as a double surprise when everyone was expecting a tax hike. Government gave us a big booster to the economy without raising any taxes. So while we all have gone through the budgets and all of its impact, today we have with us Harshad Patwardhan, our CIO for equities, to discuss how budget will impact our funds, how we are repositioning or positioning them, what lies ahead for markets, and most importantly, the rally which we have seen, how sustainable it is post the union budget announcement. So welcome Harshad.
Hi Niranjan, good evening everybody.
So guys, we'll take few questions for Harshad, and then post that we'll also take questions from the audience today. So Harshad, thank you for joining us today. My very first question, every news headline has talked about budget being very good, and markets have also reacted very positively. People are also comparing this budget to one which was presented in 1991. What is so special about this budget, and how exactly will this turn the fortune of our economy?
Okay, so I will maybe take a cue from the reference that you made to 1991, and I rate a couple of interviews which tended to compare this budget with what was presented by Dr. Manmohan Singh way back in 1991. And one distinguishing factor compared to 1991 was that in 1991 the big reforms that were unleashed were done in the backdrop of compulsion. Uh, you know, uh, Many people in the audience will remember the backdrop of 1991, where Indian economy was in a crisis, and this crisis was a crisis which was a foreign exchange crisis. So, we had very little dollars left to cover, barely a few weeks of imports. And so it was basically prodded by the IMF, and we wanted rescue from IMF. Whereas if you look at what was unveiled this Monday, there was no such compulsion. Particularly on the foreign exchange side, our situation is much better compared to where we were. Right, I think the forex reserves are touching $600 billion. So there was no outside pressure to come out with these kind of reformist measure, and that's the reason why I think many commentators have said that this could be a bit bigger than 1991 from that perspective. I think yes, the budget is important. Uh, just to remind everybody, and some of the attendees today might have attended our call, Niranjan, you will recall that we did in November last year, where we said
Yes.
that it's very risky to be underweight Indian equities. And we did that at the backdrop of two things. One was the US election results, which was a big event risk at that point of time. And subsequently, in a few days' time, as many of you will recall, that there were good news flow on the vaccine front. So Pfizer announced that they have a vaccine which is very effective. And therefore, at that point of time, we thought that it was risky to be underweight because Indian economy had already bottomed out in April, May, June quarter, and rising pretty well. The second thing was the results of companies, and I'm referring to the results for the previous quarter. That is not October, November, December, the one quarter before that. They were quite encouraging. Indian companies had managed that very well, and there was a surprise on the positive side. And after a long time, the earnings were upgraded subsequently. Uh, and the liquidity, particularly from foreigners, was very buoyant. So therefore, we said at that point of time, it's very risky to be underweight. If you look at fast forward to this Monday, we know a few more things. One is the budget itself, and the budget, is very notable from three perspectives. One is a big fiscal boost. I think most of the time since March to, I would say, Jan, was spent by commentators and analysts asking about or urging government to provide fiscal boost, because Indian government did not really give any fiscal boost compared to many other economies. And a lot of the heavy lifting was done by RBI. What we learned on Monday was that I think the baton has passed probably to the government of India. Everybody was very surprised by the announcement that they will allow fiscal deficit to go up to almost 9.5. If you adjust for the off-balance sheet item coming on balance sheet, it's still substantially bigger. If you recall, the BJP and NDA government in general, if you look at this government over the last 7 years and even Mr. Vajpayee's government, they were very fiscally conservative. So to that extent, this is a big surprise that a government has decided that growth is the priority and we will spend to get growth. So this relentless focus on growth at the expense of being slightly, more, I would say, aggressive on the fiscal front. I think that was a big change, which was a pleasant surprise. Even more pleasant surprise was that, although I'm sure there was a lot of, a strong case possibly from economists' perspective to raise taxes, this kind of fiscal boost was done without raising taxes. I think that was, from markets' perspective particularly, that was another pleasant surprise. The third thing, and this is not strictly linked to the budget, so therefore, okay, you are not going to raise taxes, but you're going to give a fiscal boost. How do you do that? And the third element on the supply side is that the government decided that they're going to fund a lot of it by asset monetization and also privatization. So the symbolic value of saying that we are going to privatize 2 PSU banks and 1 PSU insurer, I think that is also very strong. In addition to that, if I may add, although it's not strictly linked to the budget, the third point is that if you look at the results of corporate India for quarter ending October, November, December, they have been a big surprise. If the surprise last time was because of cost cutting, this time the surprise is also because of demand improvement and market share gains by corporate India. So I would say that if November we wrote it's risky to be underweight, I would say that even though the markets are higher, it's even more risky now to be underweight Indian equities.
Right, Harshad, and I remember, when we released that communication, it was a quite bold communication, but because the other side of the market was actually worried after a big rise in the indices. But yeah, I completely take your point. But one worry, Harshad, is coming to valuations, on the valuations. So one major worry amongst investors is valuations are looking expensive of course, on a trailing basis. And also, some people also measure it based on market to GDP and some other ratios. So how do you analyze this, and is this a real worry?
So of course, valuations are important, and there are different ways of looking at valuations. I think the most common way that we adopt in the market, and it's also talked about in the media, is linked to the earnings. So look at the price to earning ratio, and you're right, Niranjan, that many people that I have encountered in the market somehow look at price to trailing earnings. Saying that we don't know what's going to happen in the future and therefore let's look at. But in my opinion, looking at price to earnings on a trailing earnings basis is like looking, in the rear view mirror while you are driving ahead. So although yes, estimates will be wrong from time to time, it still makes sense to look at 1 year ahead. Because of the dislocation caused because of the COVID crisis, and I recall when the COVID crisis struck in March, April, there were estimates that the Indian economy will shrink by 10%, 12%, all sorts of estimates were there. And it was almost impossible to predict or forecast earnings in that kind of a scenario. So therefore, if you looked at on the price to book basis, I will not say that the market is cheap, but I don't think the market is as expensive as it looks on a price to trailing earning basis. When there is an inflection point, it's very dangerous to focus on trailing earnings. And why I'm saying that there could be an inflection, because there are 2 consecutive quarters. Of course, this quarter is October, November, December quarter reporting is not over yet. But if you look at some of the high profile companies that have reported, that has led to a big upgrade in earnings for corporate India. So in my opinion, that is one thing to be kept in mind. But the most important thing when we talk about valuations, and that's not just true for Indian markets, but US markets or any other market, you have to look at valuation in the context of where the interest rates are. Right. So if you compare valuations for Indian markets earnings yield or inverse of price to earning ratio, and compare that with, let's say in the Indian context, 10-year government bond yield, which is a risk-free, what are the interest rates available? Yeah. On that basis, if you look at it, currently the markets, I would say, are in line with the long-term average. So yes, optically the markets look expensive, but I think compared to risk-free interest rates, they are in line with the long-term average. The other important thing to remember when we are thinking about valuations is to ask the question, where are we in the cycle? And if you look at the return on equity for Nifty companies, I'm taking Nifty just as a proxy for corporate India, you will notice that we probably bottomed out about year and a half ago and starting to trend up, because earnings growth for Nifty companies was barely 2% over the last 6 years. And it's only now that we are inching up. So we are in the early stage of an upturn. And at that stage, I think, when you look at these valuation measures that I talked about at that early stage of growth, I don't think they are expensive.
Right. Another point which you already mentioned, the earnings growth in last quarter were quite good. And, in some sectors, actually, we have already seen upgrades and they have taken a lot of people on a positive surprise. So when do we see the broad-based earnings cycle picking up in India corporate world? Because over the last almost, if I remember correctly, 6-7 years, the earnings growth has been merely a single digit. However, for India or overall market to clock a double-digit return, we need to come back to that double-digit earnings growth. When do you see that happening, and what are those triggers which you feel will play out over the next 2-3 years?
Sure. So Niranjan, I will try to answer this question from two angles. One is more from a top-down basis, and then I will talk a little bit more about the results, as we see as they are coming out. So from a top-down basis, if you analyze the past as to, in what kinds of scenarios the earnings growth is fast and in what kind of scenarios earnings growth is lackluster. So if you look at the economic growth, real, you can take, nominal GDP, let's say. Whenever the nominal GDP growth is decelerating, that is when the earnings growth tends to be very lackluster. So if you look at last 5-6 years in the Indian context, ending, let's say FY20, you will notice that the nominal GDP growth was actually decelerating, right? The growth was still there, but growth every year was lower than the growth of last year. It's like a car which is going on a highway and you have applied a brake. In that kind of a scenario, you will notice that the earnings growth of corporate India also tends to be very lackluster, right? And that explains why the growth was so bad over the last 6-7 years. However, what is happening now is that Indian economy, as I said, bottomed out in the month of April, May, June, when the economy contracted by 24%. If you look at the same data in the next quarter, it I think contracted by about 7-8%. So already, although that print is negative, from 24 to minus 24 to -7, it's still a growth acceleration sequentially. So I would argue that Indian economy, after having bottomed out last year, is already accelerating. And therefore, from a top-down basis, you should expect corporate earnings growth to be significantly better than what we have seen over the last several years. So if I go by the broker estimates as of now, over the next 2 years, the expectation is that the earnings for Nifty companies, let's say, will be in 20% plus kind of range. That's what most brokers are suggesting. Now, coming to this question from a more bottom-up basis, what we are witnessing when we are, my team and I, when we listen into companies and look at the results, it's very obvious that this quarter, October, November, December quarter, there has been a big surprise on the demand side. In many cases, the volume growth has been very significant. When was the last time people heard paint companies growing their volumes at 20%? Big companies in that sector. So in general, and that is not just true for paint, it's true for electric consumer durables, it's true for a whole lot of sectors. So we have seen a big demand improvement starting to happen. And there are two elements to it. One element is clearly the Indian economy has surprised on the positive on the way to recovery. And the reason for that is that India, I would say, is probably unique in that context that as the economic activity picked up, we did not see the second wave or third wave like we saw in the US, like we saw in the UK, like we saw in many European countries. And that is what allowed India to keep on doing well because there was no second wave. Right. So Indian economic growth has surprised on the positive. The second big thing that is happening, and we are noticing and managements are saying that in their corporate commentary, is that the big companies, the organized sector has gained market share. Right. So the growth is coming from both the industry growth as well as increase in market share. Again, pretty much across the board. So as a result of that, there has been a second consecutive quarter where the earnings have surprised on the positive. Now, I have been sort of observing markets for such a long time. And in this decade, I would say this is probably the first instance where we have seen 2 consecutive quarters of earning upgrades, earning surprises on the positive side and therefore earning upgrades. So that is a very conducive backdrop for markets to continue to do well. So I would say that both from a top-down basis and bottom-up basis, there is reason to believe that earnings growth will accelerate and that will have a positive impact on the markets also.
Another worry, and of course it has contributed a lot to our current rally, which is the global liquidity and the responses from the large economies and their central banks. How do you see that playing for the market, and how long do you think liquidity globally also will be supportive? And if at all, maybe over the next 1.5 or 2 years it breaks, will that impact our markets if the valuations continue to be on a higher side?
So yes, so global liquidity has been very benign. And if you go by what the governments and what the central banks are saying, not just in India, but outside, what they are saying is that for the foreseeable future, the both the cost of money and the availability of money is going to be very, very benign. OK, so after 2 years, 3 years, what happens depends on how things shape up. And it's very clear that it will stay benign till the growth returns in a substantial way, because at that point of time you probably do not need a monetary policy to be this benign. Currently it is very, very loose. So in my opinion, for the foreseeable future, based on what the governments and central banks are saying, it will continue to be that way. And that is a big positive for emerging markets. We have already seen, for example, since September, October, big FII money coming into India. Right. So yes, there was 1 week when it reversed, but again, this week we have seen big numbers, big money coming into India. So I would expect that for several quarters ahead, situation will continue to be benign. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we are also going to see acceleration in economic growth resulting in earnings growth pickup. So once you have that sort of solid support from earnings growth, then you are not only dependent on the liquidity flowing in. So I think the more solid part of earnings growth, it appears that it's going to be there. And in the foreseeable future, monetary policy will also be benign globally.
One of the things, and you mentioned that, is very different about this budget is it was more focused on the reform side and have a very sustainable growth for the economy. In a very specific way to put it is it was more focused on the investment side of the economy and not on the consumption side. And when, in past, whenever this kind of budgets or reforms are taking place, there is obvious rotation of sectors in terms of their performance. The poor performers start performing well. And in last at least 5 years, we have seen quality or a defensive side of the economy or consumption side doing slightly well. Do you see that change in these sectoral winners going forward? And if at all, which kind of sectors or which kind of themes will outperform or likely to outperform in the next or this coming cycle?
Sure. So Niranjan, your observation is absolutely right. For the last several years, we have seen the so-called defensive sectors doing well. And that was because, as I mentioned, the economy itself was decelerating, earnings growth was not there, so there was a lack of confidence. And also in that kind of a scenario, typically BFSI sector, tends to suffer in a low growth environment. And of course, there was a big burden of NPLs, which was a legacy problem. So yes, so that we believe it's set to reverse. In fact, some of the people in the audience might recall that in the previous calls, we did mention that from being underweight on BFSI in the aftermath of the COVID crisis when it first struck, gradually we have become neutral to now overweight on banking. And so banking and financial services sector is one sector which in a accelerating economy and accelerating earnings scenario typically tends to do well. The other important thing going for that sector, and that is something that is now evident in the many results that I'm sure people would have looked at. But frankly, the CEOs of those companies had started talking about it for the last several months, that in the darkest days of COVID crisis, there was a lot of fear as to what is going to happen to Indian banking sector, which was already reeling under NPLs, etc. So many people thought that this is going to be another big shocker on top of the already burgeoning problems. But last few months, the bosses of these big corporate lenders have started saying that actually situation on the credit quality side is going to be better than what was feared, and that is evident in many results that have recently come out. So that's another thing going for this sector. So this is one sector that we believe will probably continue to do well. And as the growth picks up, clearly there is going to be a credit growth improvement also, in addition to the NPL problem getting sorted out slowly. The other big sector that we are very positive on, and that will likely do well in the scenario that I just painted, are the industrial sector. If you look at last 8 to 10 years, corporate capex, private capex was almost non-existent in India. A lot of the capex that was happening was from the government side on the infrastructure. We believe that with the relentless focus on growth that this government has, and they are, so if you look at the budget, for example, there is a lot of focus on infrastructure creation. And of course, they have taken some steps for infrastructure financing. In addition to that, there is a tremendous focus on manufacturing in India. So there are many schemes that the government has come out with. So with that kind of a emphasis on investment, as you rightly put it, we believe that industrial as a sector will also likely outperform, because at some stage, if this growth momentum continues, private capex will also come back. In fact, we are already seeing signs from various sectors that companies looking to build capacity, new capacity. We're already hearing that. So industrials and BFSI, I would say, are the two sectors that will likely outperform.
Coming to, Harshad, your favorite segment, which is mid and small caps, right? We have already seen there's some outperformance started in this segment. This segment had seen underperformance for almost 3 years now. How sustainable is this, change in the cycle, and how do you see this segment or this outperformance going forward?
Sure. So before that, just to put a context, and I will refer everybody to a presentation that we actually put out on our mid-cap outlook. I think we did that last month sometime.
Yes.
So if somebody is interested, please have a look. It's, I think, there on our website. So yes, if you did this calculation at the end of December 2020, you would say that on a 3-year and 5-year basis, mid caps have underperformed large caps, right? But if you actually look at the data, you will realize that all of that underperformance actually came from 2 calendar years, 2018 and 2019. And as I was explaining earlier, these 2 years also was a time when the economy was decelerating. Overall earnings growth was very lackluster, and underperformance of mid caps versus large caps in those 2 years was the highest on record over the last 20 years, right? So these were the 2 years. And if you, I'm sure everybody recalls that in those 2 years, the markets were very narrow markets, that even among large caps, most of the performance was actually coming from barely 5 to 7 stocks. So in that kind of a market, mid caps did not do well. But if you look at the longer term history, and there are various measures that we have given in that particular presentation, I don't want to repeat. I will just mention one. If you look at on a 3-year rolling basis or a 5-year rolling basis, historically, there is the odds of mid caps outperforming are very, very good. If I recall correctly, on a 5-year basis, almost 77% of the times on a 5-year rolling basis, mid caps have done better than large caps. And this particular statement is on the basis of index performance. As you know, as everybody knows that the alpha generation on the mid cap side tends to be far higher than on the large cap side. So actually, if you compare fund to fund, you would, the odds of making more money over longer periods of time are much higher in the mid cap compared to large cap. The second reason why we believe mid caps will do well going forward is that this recovery that I referred to is going to be a broad-based recovery. It's not going to be a narrow recovery. Right. Firstly, the economy is accelerating. If you look at the government, what it is trying to do, government is trying to give a lot of boost to many sectors which are actually going to act in favor of many parts of the economy where mid caps and small caps tend to dominate. So if you look at infrastructure, for example, government is trying to give a lot of boost on road projects, rail projects, urban infrastructure, water projects, and so on. Now, in each of these house building, so in each of these sectors, there are many downstream businesses that benefit from this big money that is going to be poured into these sectors. Many of those companies, particularly industrial as a sector, if you see, many of those companies happen to be mid caps and small caps, right? So, so the other thing is that government is giving PLI, production link incentives, for many sectors to reverse the hollowing out of the manufacturing that happened. Now, these are sectoral initiatives. So if you look at the sectors that the government is trying to promote, many of those sectors are dominated from a stock market perspective by mid caps and small caps. So that's the reason why I believe that mid caps and small caps are likely to do better in the medium term.
Also, Harshad, I would like you to, talk more about the liquidity things which we managed on the mid cap side, specifically in our funds, because we have often seen, when there is a big rally in the mid cap and small cap, most illiquid stocks also get into the portfolios of investors and, many funds. So how carefully we manage that space, and how do you see that broad-based rally? And how consciously we are on the liquidity front in our funds currently.
Yes, so thanks Dheeraj for asking this question, because for mid cap and small cap investing, I think liquidity criteria is very, very important. And I will spend maybe 60 seconds on that, but I will urge people in the audience to please go to our website, and we have a full-fledged presentation also on the liquidity, where we argue that if you are recommending a mid cap or a small cap fund, liquidity is a very important criteria from advisors' perspective, and we explain in detail. But for us, liquidity, what liquidity really means is that in good times, liquidity may not matter, but you have to be conscious of liquidity. So we think about liquidity at the design stage itself. So we may like a particular stock, but we don't want to be carried away and own so much of it that in bad times it's difficult for us to sell that stock. That's really the crux of liquidity, because you have to take into account interest of not only investors who will redeem first in times of crisis, but investors who choose to remain with the firm, with the fund. So just so that you will understand this issue better, if you look at some of the accidents that happened in the fixed income side in 2019 and 2020, they happened probably because the liquidity was ignored. So the smart investors managed to redeem first, and the remaining investors, were left, sort of their interests were ignored. So that is something that we want to avoid at all costs. And at a design stage itself, we know based on the redemption redemption criteria that we have in mind as how much will we own in any particular stock. And I will really urge you to go through that presentation and get in touch with your relationship manager in Edelweiss as to how to compute it. It's very easy to compute. with an internet access and Excel, in 15 minutes, you can devise a worksheet where you can analyze the fact sheet very quickly and find out which funds are better from a liquidity perspective and which funds are worse.
Right. So Harshad, in terms of positioning of your funds, has anything materially changed, specifically in the large and mid cap fund and multi cap fund post budget, or as you said, there will be some changes in the sectoral winners and all. How do you see your fund currently positioned? What themes are you playing? And also from the mid and small cap and large cap split, both large and mid and multi cap fund, how are they positioned right now?
Sure. So, obviously, Niranjan, I can't tell you or anybody as to what I'm doing in the fund after budget, but I can talk about how we were positioned at the end of January. Okay. So at the end of January, and I will point out as to which way we have moved over a period of time. So if you look at our Flexi Cap fund, for example, we are at about under 65% in large cap. And that number a few months ago was closer to 70% plus. So we have moved away from large caps into mid caps and small caps. And so under 65% is large cap and about 22% is mid cap and about 9% is small caps. So over the last few months, we have moved away from large caps into mid caps and small caps in line with our expectation that mid caps and small caps will do better. In our large and mid cap fund, at the end of this January, we were at about 51% in large cap, 37% in mid caps, and about 7-8% in small caps. Again, in this, if you notice 2-3 months ago, we were probably more like 55-57% in large caps. So even there, we have moved away from large caps into mid caps and small caps. If you look at sectorally, also, you will notice that we have increased our overweight. If you look at the Jan end numbers, we have increased our overweight in BFSI and industrials as a sector.
One now, I mean, as you mentioned, Harshad, we are, it's very risky to be underweight equities right now. Earnings growth will come up. How should one approach and at the same time, mid and small cap segment is also looking very good. How should one approach if he or she is investing into equities and currently is underweight equities and want to do a catch-up allocation? How should one approach? Whether he should invest lump sum or systematically over maybe 6 months, 12 months. What do you think?
Okay, so that's a very tough question for me to answer, Niranjan, and I really think that my job is much easier, or our job in the investment team is much easier than the jobs of our advisor partners, because it all depends on context, right? So it's hard for me to say, but I will give a few pointers. So in this mid-cap outlook presentation that we did, there is an interesting slide based on the previous rallies, which basically suggests that particularly in mid caps and small caps, but that's also true for the markets as a whole, that when things change and when the rally starts, the returns tend to be front-ended. So if you are convinced that things have turned for the better, not just because the markets have gone up, but because earnings prospects have changed, the liquidity is abundant, the government has taken many steps, reform steps, and that will make that growth more sustainable. If you are convinced, then there is no point in spreading it too much. So then there is no point in saying that I will invest over the next 24 months, because a large part of that, and I will really urge the audience to go and look at that particular slide where we talk about how the returns in the mid-cap side on the way up tend to be front-ended. Typically, the first year accounts for a large part of the overall returns that happen, and we have given 3 case studies. So I would say that if you are convinced with the argument, then don't spread it too thinly. Invest it maybe over a few weeks, of course. Doing it lump sum, the danger is that there will always be corrections from time to time. I think that is something that we have to remember. We also have to remember that mid cap, small cap as a category will be more volatile compared to the large caps. So keeping that in mind, spreading it over a narrow period of time probably makes sense. But that's only if you are convinced about our argument. The other, Niranjan, can I take a liberty of saying
please.
one thing that you
Yes.
didn't ask? I was discussing with a few friends in the advisor community, and I think what people tend to focus a lot on and that he was telling me from investors perspective, people tend to focus a lot on what they own.
Right.
And they look at their statement and say that, okay, I've made this much money, or they are fearful that markets are going up. And but what is also important to remember, and this is the point that we highlighted when we in November we said it's too risky to be underweight, is also the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of staying out of the markets in times like this is very, very high. And if you look at, we all look at long-term returns of the markets and say that they have averaged about 16%. You will not get that average if you stay out of the market in the good times, because the 16% is not every year, right? If you look at it, it's like a normal, Gaussian chart. So if you miss out on the good years, then you are not going to average 16%. So that is an opportunity cost is an important point. I think that I think advisors can communicate with the investors.
Right. Harshad, one more, and you would say again, it's a tough, question to answer. But taking some liberty, I would like to ask that question is, whenever we have seen bull market cycles, they tend to remain for till, you clock a return of maybe 150, 200% on an absolute basis. If you see this rally, which started, it's hardly around 70-80% from, when it started. Where we are in this entire rally or in this entire cycle, and maybe you don't give me a absolute answer, but if in terms of percentage, we are maybe 50-60% all through this rally, and rest 40-50% is still away. What would be that analysis from your point of view?
Niranjan, I'm not, neither am I an astrologer, right, nor am I so smart to answer that question with any precision. So I frankly don't know. But I will just highlight a few things. If you look at December end, I don't have data as of today, but I've done that analysis. If you look at it on a December end, December 2020 end, if you looked at how the markets had done over the last 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, and so on, it was barely 10-11% CAGR, right? So I think people tend to focus a lot on from the bottom, from March where it is. But if you look at 1, 3, 5 year basis, I don't think the markets have done great. In fact,
that was exactly my point actually.
Yes. So markets have delivered over the last 1, 3, 5 years, delivered returns which are lower than the long-term average of 16%, right? Now, if you look at the initial conditions as we speak today, as I mentioned, that the Indian economy, after decelerating for a long time, has started accelerating. In corporate earnings growth, after being very lackluster, almost close to 1-2% over the last 6-7 years, it's set to accelerate. Right. In terms of the monetary policy conditions, that the question that you asked, at least in the foreseeable future, the monetary condition both in India as well as overseas is going to be benign. So if you put it all together, there is reason to believe that the returns over the next few years are likely to be far better than what we have witnessed over the last few years. That is a statement that we can make with a reasonable degree of probability.
Right. Thanks for answering that in some way, Harshad. Lastly, a very important question: what are the risks today? Which, and of course, risks are always unknown. But what can be the risks which can emanate from global markets or even Indian markets over the next 2-3 years and can break this rally?
I think one risk that is foremost that we have to keep in mind is that India so far has been lucky not to have the second wave of infection. Right. Okay, maybe we will never have one, which will be great. But for me, I think that is one big risk because the reason why the economic rebound has been faster than expected and better than most other countries is because we have not had a second wave. So I would say that any second wave coming as the economy opens up, I think that will be a significant risk to keep in mind. In addition to that, globally, what the issue that we discuss in some detail, the monetary conditions are very benign. Okay, so as and when this situation changes, and that's not something that is in the near term horizon, it's probably few years away. That is the time that we have to watch. Okay, as to how because if you recall 2013, and many people will recall 2013 when the taper tantrum happened.
Right.
It happened because the Federal Reserve flagged that we are going to a few months down the line, we are going to start tapering. I am sure everybody learned a lot. And if you look at the Federal Reserve governor's statements these days, they said that we are mindful of communicating a wrong thing. So therefore, they are very particular, saying that we are not even thinking of tapering as of now. But as and when that happens, we have to keep that in mind. But I don't want people to start worrying about it from tomorrow, because that event is probably several quarters away. But I think you have to keep in mind that yes, as and when things change on that front, we have to be watchful. The third point is that the government has been very bold in terms of, and we discussed Niranjan today more about budget because that's more topical. But I believe that you have to look at what this government has delivered over the last several years in terms of structural reforms, including GST, including IBC, including labor code, agri reforms, and so on. So if there is a reversal by the government of any important reform step, I think that will also be considered as a negative. So these are the few risks that one has to be aware of, and the general risk which I actually point out every time I communicate is that you should always be in a market like India, which is an emerging market. One should mentally be always prepared for a meaningful correction. Many times it happens without any obvious reason, but one has to be mentally always prepared. And the smart way to do it is be disciplined about your model portfolio and sticking to that.
Harshad, actually, I think so. We have covered almost all questions, and thank you so much for being with us and sharing your views. I think so we can end this session. If you have, Harshad, any final comments, with that we can end this session.
Okay, so only one thing that which I referred to is that this is in line with what we have been saying in November and what we said again after the budget, that it's risky to be underweight compared to your model portfolio, and please do take into account the opportunity cost of sitting out of the market. I think that's something that you will not see on the paper because it will not reflect in your statements, but that is an important point to consider. And also please have a look at the distribution of returns for equity markets. There are some very good years, there are some bad years. If you are aiming for the average return, you cannot really miss out on the good years. That is the message that I want to end with.
Right. So thank you all, and thank you so much, Harshad. Thank you all for being with us. As Harshad mentioned, you can visit our website and get into the insights section for more insights which Harshad has mentioned on mid-cap and liquidity and overall the equity market presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.